Hi, this is David Miller here with the second in a series of mini-lectures on Philip Pullman's novel, The Amber Spyglass. Our topic for today, Puberty Saves the Universe. I said we'd pick up mapping the action today with the Battle of the Cave, but the forces in this battle have been gathering throughout the opening movements of the plot. Chapters 2 and 3 introduce Will and Yorick. The corresponding chapters in the second set of 3, 5 and 6, show Lord Asriel and the Church dispatching their armies to the Himalayas. Will and Yorick join forces in Chapter 8, and by the end of Chapter 9, all three fighting forces are on their way to Lyra. Chapter 11 brings us to the brink of combat. Will has visited the cave to see Lyra, and the Galavespians in the approaching Zeppelin have mounted their winged steeds to descend and guard her. In chapters 12 and 13, while the battle rages in the valley, Will and Lyra make their escape, accompanied by Tialys and Salmakia, a foursome that will journey together from now until the final battle in chapters 28 to 31. The most important events in this series are the breaking of the knife and the decision by Will and Lyra, right at the center point of these 5 chapters, that they will journey to the underworld to find Roger. The events are related, of course, since they will need the knife to descend to the world of the dead. The final 2 chapters concern Yorick Bernisson's decision to mend the knife and the skill with which he does so. His words to Will about what he calls the intentions of the tool will come back with a vengeance at the end of the novel, as you might expect. The section closes with Lyra's realization that for all their protectors and surrogate parents, it's all coming on to us. This, too, is a crucial turning point. And this brings us back to the first of our bridging chapters, which, as we have seen, introduce the intention craft and the amber spyglass. What we see now is that these form another of the overlapping patterns we've been noticing, because they join with the final 2 chapters of the previous group to form a series of 4 linked by their focus on technology. The name of the intention craft clearly echoes Yorick's warning to Will about the intentions of the tool, as Lord Asriel's invention seems to achieve a perfect marriage, a kind of telepathic bond between the user's intentions and those of the tool. Yorick's painstaking work at his improvised forge is balanced by Mary's equally patient layering and sanding of the lacquer she uses to create the apparatus that gives the novel its title. As we approach the underworld with Lyra, Will, and their miniature companions, one of the dominant themes of the trilogy emerges into new prominence. This is the theme of lies, truth, and the telling of stories, and we'll come back for a closer look at it in the next mini-lecture. For now, we may simply notice that Lyra's encounter with her own death is followed by her separation from Pantaleimon, and that this separation resembles the intercision of Volume 1, a form of spiritual castration that results in children's deaths. The underworld through which Lyra and her friends journey is closely related to those of classical epic. The presence of the Harpies signals a link to this epic tradition, for these mythic creatures appear in both Virgil and Homer. Pullman's underworld is a space through which you travel, like the one in Virgil's Aeneid, but the ghosts who wander there are hungry for human contact, like the ghosts Odysseus summons in Homer, drawn to the smell of blood. For them, as for the Harpies, true stories figure as a form of nourishment and are in this way parallel to lifeblood. So it is that Lyra finally succeeds in charming the Harpies, not with fantastic romance adventures about a duke and a duchess, but with vivid memories from her own childhood in Oxford. Following chapter 23, the sojourn in the underworld is interrupted for a second time. This is the turning point in the action of the final novel, as Mrs. Coulter, arriving in Geneva with the intention of serving as Lord Asriel's spy, unwittingly delivers into the hands of the Church the one thing they need in order to kill Lyra, a lock of her hair. This leads to the explosion in chapter 24, triggered by yet another intercision, and thus parallel to the explosion that concludes the first volume, the one that tore a hole in the sky between different worlds. Lord Asriel's descent in the Intention craft to rescue Mrs. Coulter near the close of this chapter will find its parallel in the next chapter as the Harpy rescues Lyra from the abyss opened by the explosion. In its turn, Lyra's close call at the edge of the abyss anticipates Mary's out-of-body slipping away in the canopy of trees in chapter 27. Mary returns from the edge by recalling all the sensations that made up being alive, the same sensations that gave Lyra's stories their power to charm the Harpies. With chapter 28, we approach Pullman's great retelling of the war in heaven from Milton's Paradise Lost. This series of 4 chapters looks back to the earlier battle at the cave. There, Lyra's parents were each, in their own way, trying to protect her. And now that mission has its full effect on them. Lord Asriel has his own turning point, a moment in which he recognizes that protecting Lyra is the only thing that matters. The conversation between him and Mrs. Coulter in this scene is important for many reasons, but one of them is that we see a kind of reformation. Lee Scoresby, when he consciously took on the role of surrogate father to Lyra in The Subtle Knife, observed that she had been unfortunate in her parents. Here they come together in a change of heart and purpose to support her destiny. And so together they destroy Megatron. We'll have to talk more about the strange way this comes about, with Mrs. Coulter employing her beauty and her powers of deception to seduce the Regent. For now, perhaps we might simply notice that it forms an odd counterpart to the fall of man in Genesis, and to the retelling of that story we will soon encounter in the novel's second climax. Many other lines of action converge and are completed in this culminating series of chapters. All of the groups from all of the worlds come together. Even the underworld is opened, and its ghosts join in the final combat, fighting hand to hand, more or less, with the specters from the world of Cittàgazze. The Galavespians survive just long enough to help Will and Lyra reunite after 13 chapters of agonized separation with their demons. What I've been calling the novel's other climax arrives in a 4-chapter series that balances and contrasts with the culminating battle. Where that series began at midnight, this one opens with a scene of morning awakening. The crucial action in the war is Mrs. Coulter's seduction of Megatron, followed by the combined efforts of her and Lord Asriel to drag Megatron into the abyss. The crucial action in the Malefa world is the sexual awakening of Will and Lyra, followed by the return of Balthamos, who finds the courage in his final moments to kill off Father Gomez. The battle overthrows the Regent and the Authority. The transformation of the Eden myth, as Will and Lyra fall in love, will undo the drift of dust toward oblivion and begin the healing of the wounds inflicted on the universe by the Subtle Knife and its dark mechanical twins, the intercision machines that blast holes between worlds in the first and third volumes. There are many interesting features of the narrative in this section, among them the importance of memory in triggering sexual awakening. This carries over from the scenes of Lyra's storytelling in the world of the dead, as the spirits exiting the underworld to dissolve in bliss whisper to Mary, "Tell them stories." And so she does, relating to the young couple her own sexual awakening on a beach in Italy. Within that memory is a second memory, for Mary's attraction to her colleague at dinner is triggered when a taste of the confection called marzipan suddenly takes her back to her own first love in adolescence. In a remarkable moment, we see the effect of this story on Lyra as she feels herself transformed from within. This is the moment in which Mary fulfills her role as tempter. The next morning, when Lyra acts on her newfound feelings, she will fulfill her role as the second Eve, and the fall to which she tempts Will reverses the flow of dust into the abyss. The denouement that follows this second climax brings with it a terrible reversal in recognition. The technical terms from Aristotle are peripeteia for reversal and anagnorisis for recognition. As Yorick's warning about the subtle knife proves all too prophetic. The knife, broken and repaired, must now be destroyed. All the windows between worlds, except for one, the window that releases the dead for their blissful return unto dust, must be closed up. Will and Lyra must return to their separate worlds and live apart. This final separation is an ironic version of intercision, for as they are reunited with their truant demons, who have now taken their final adult forms, they are separated from each other. Before this final separation takes place, there is a moment, handled with some delicacy, I think, in which Will and Lyra touch each other's demons. We saw as early as Volume 1 what the taboo on touching another person's demon means. It is part of the complex role that demons and intercision play in the advent or the prevention of puberty. Next time, we'll take a closer look at the role played in this final volume by two motifs that turn out to be closely related, the role of storytelling and the meaning and importance of sexuality. Meanwhile, for class discussion, let's return to a familiar topic, biblical typology. Given how explicit the references are to the book of Genesis, let's see if we can figure out why Pullman has imagined a version of Christianity that seems not to include the New Testament. His story of heaven and hell has no mention of Christ.